further ado, I will pass you on to Greg Little.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. I got interested in Native Americans and Indians in 1983, and it came out of nowhere, literally from nowhere. I had no interest whatsoever in, I'm sorry I have to use the term Indians, I had no interest whatsoever in mounds. And in 1983, I had already gotten a doctorate, I had a master's degree in psychology, I was working professionally, and I had written a book about UFOs, came out the same year Andrew's first book came out, and it was making rounds among publishers at the time. And for inexplicable reasons that still, I have no idea even today, for 10 straight nights, that's the best we can remember, I had a series of dreams. And the series of dreams was actually the exact same dream. It occurred over and over and over. And it was basically this. I went to an Indian mound site. I walked around the mounds, stood on them, and took pictures. The next night, Indian mound sites, walk around, take pictures. Again and again and again. Night after night, 10 nights. And these dreams went on all night long. And I remember telling my wife, what the hell is going on? What is this? And then we had a few other experiences with symbols. And suddenly it all made sense when we visited our first mound site ever. And I say quite accurately, and have written this over and over, that everything that I knew about Native Americans and about Indian mounds could have been written on the back of a postage stamp. Now, if you're young, you don't know what that means because you've never used a postage stamp. But they still exist, for those of you that don't know, and they're quite small. But that's really true. I knew nothing. So I set about the task of trying to find out what the dreams were about. And I found out, and I made a promise, and actually we then got involved with some Native Americans. We had a Native American shaman, an arrow priest of the Cheyenne tribe, live with us for 30 days. I don't recommend that to anybody, having a genuine Native American shaman with his family move in with you. But it was pretty interesting, and it led me to decide that I absolutely had to write an illustrated encyclopedia of Native American mounds, and the goal was to get a photographic record of everyone in existence, which at the time I had no idea what that meant. But it's led me to this point and to Andrew. And let me see if this goes the right direction. Goes that way. Okay. So I want to start at the beginning, or a beginning. 1492, October 12th, this man, Christopher Columbus, for the first time steps into what you folks call the New World. He discovered the New World. Columbus made 4 visits over 12 years, and he never set foot in North America. He was only in the area of the Caribbean and a bit of South America. That was it. Columbus was met by a very kind and gentle people called the Taino. The Taino were a sort of primitive tribe. They had people who they were fighting with called the Caribs. That's where the name Caribbean comes from. Columbus enslaved them very quickly, and the Spanish at the time did not really go north until about the year 1513, and they went to La Florida. What does it mean? Anybody? Oh, come on. The flowers. And they called everything north of there La Florida. Today, Florida is just the peninsula there. In La Florida, the first Spanish that came in, the first expedition that we know about was Ponce De Leon, who was not really looking for the fountain of youth. He was looking for gold. The Spanish were trying to trade black slaves to the Native Americans for gold. They never got any. They were fought constantly. But this began something that I know Hugh was interested in, and it's the story of giants. When the Spanish explorers very first started going into all the different areas in what is now the southeastern United States, they encountered some exceedingly tall people. Now, when I say exceedingly tall, I'm talking about 7 to maybe 8 feet. I don't know of a single account that is verified where they were above 8 feet in height, but 7 feet certainly. Today, mainstream archaeologists hate that. They will deny it. They will say they were mistaken. One of the things that you'll hear at museums is that these old depictions of it, well, what the Indians did, they took their hair and they turned it into like a beehive bun and stuck it up. And that's what the Spanish were interpreting as tall people. But that's not really true. I'm skipping a lot here, but let's go to this man, Hernando De Soto. If you watch some films made by Native Americans, they believe De Soto was Satan. He was considered a very evil man. But what happened to the Native Americans would have happened whether De Soto went through or not. Hernando De Soto took 600 conquistadors, 100 black slaves, and he traipsed through the entire southeast of the United States for 4 years. He himself died and his body was dumped into the Mississippi River before his few people that survived got out. But they went virtually all over the southeastern part of America. They landed in Tampa Bay in 1542, and it was at a mound site. This is actually a depiction of a mound site in Tampa Bay, probably where De Soto landed. De Soto and his troops made this bizarre march, starting here in Tampa Bay, and you can see the names of all the villages, towns, and cities they went to. So this is Florida. They went through Florida, they went through Georgia, they went into South Carolina, North Carolina, down back into Georgia, into Alabama. They hit Tennessee here. They then went through parts of Mississippi, back into Tennessee, to Missouri, to Arkansas, back to Tennessee, then over into Arkansas, into Oklahoma, Texas. They made a short excursion down into Texas, came back up, and then went down through Louisiana. They encountered village after village, city after city, mound site after mound site. There were 4 chroniclers that they carried along. 2 of the chronicles remain today that are believed to be accurate. They talk about massive walled cities that were inhabited by thousands of people, incredible artifacts that the Spanish themselves said were as amazing as anything they had seen in Greece or Italy. Most people think the Native Americans were savages. Don't like the word, but that's the word that was applied. But they were actually, it was a very complex society. We'll get into that, I hope, in a few moments. But the Spanish, that incursion that De Soto led, did 2 things. One, first of all, they were fought constantly. And what led them on that long route is that quickly the Native American chiefs realized these people are bad, and all they wanted was gold. And they also got freshwater pearls, which were almost useless, but they took those too. The Spanish would go in and slaughter entire towns. They usually took the chief hostage, his family hostage, and then the people didn't know what to do because these were all chiefdoms. And when they did this, the rest of the village would either run or they would attack. The Spanish had a type of armor that arrows could not penetrate, the spears could not penetrate, and the Spanish also had guns, which the Indians had never seen. The Spanish sometimes engaged, got friendly with one group. As you can see here, the Spanish are fighting with a group of Native Americans against another. Some of these stories are just unbelievable, how they would get to a village and slaughter 1,000 or 2,000 people. But the reason I'm showing this is because look at this tall chief right here, and there's another one over here. The Spanish noticed that all of the chiefs and the elite were exceedingly tall people. In fact, one of them here, this is in an actual school book used for elementary children in Alabama. This is Chief Tuscaloosa. Tuscaloosa was 7 feet, roughly 7 feet 6 inches tall. The Spanish said he was 7.5 feet tall. They first met Tuscaloosa's son, who was a little taller than Tuscaloosa. They said he was a gigantic man, that his proportions were equal to his height. He was not, he didn't appear to be deformed at all. Tuscaloosa was so large, when they first met him, he was at the top of a 70-foot mound. He was sitting on a throne at the top of a mound, and De Soto was at the base of it. Tuscaloosa came down, and they said he towered above De Soto. But Tuscaloosa said, "Oh, let me take you to our village where we have gold." And the Spanish took the biggest horse they had to put Tuscaloosa on so he could ride on a horse. And he had to hold his legs up because his legs drug on the ground the entire way. So I'm starting to discuss a bit about the giants, which there's a purpose here. When De Soto made this trek through the southeast, he not only killed a lot of natives, they spread a disease for which the natives had virtually no immunity at all. Smallpox. There were other diseases they spread, but smallpox was the main one, and we'll talk about the numbers in a minute. There are a lot of misconceptions about Native Americans. Most of those are based on, like the film I showed you earlier at the very beginning, those of you that saw it with the natives dancing. This is supposed to be Hernando De Soto discovering the Mississippi River, which was done very close to Memphis. Andrew has been at the site. It's called Desoto Mounds in Memphis. That's where it's believed to have occurred. When De Soto got there, there was a chief on the top of a massive mound right at the edge of the river. There were canoes on the other side of the river and an estimated 5,000 Indians on the other side trying to stop the Spanish from crossing. But do you see a mound here? No. What you see are teepees and wigwams, which they did not have. That occurred much later when the Indians were pushed into the west. That image is on the back of something you've probably never seen. I've never seen one of these in the flesh either. It's a $500 bill. Actually, the reason I haven't seen one of these, the cheapest $500 bill I've ever seen now is about $3,000, and it's in bad condition. We actually have there's a $100,000 bill. I bet you didn't know that. It's not worth the paper it's printed on. Probably true. Anyway, a lot of misconceptions about Native Americans. One massive misconception, people believe that the Americas was this vast, unexplored forest, that nobody was there, that there were just a few natives there. Well, that actually was true around the year 1600, when the first settlers came in, when the Pilgrims came over. But when Christopher Columbus landed in the Bahamas, the estimate now, and I'm calling it an estimate, it's what everybody agrees to, there were at least 57 million people living in the Americas. 57 million. That's a lot of people. Remember, Columbus 1492, within one generation, the population was down to around 5 million or less, 4 million. They all died from diseases. Now, what would happen in a society that passes all their information along verbally? All of your old people will die, and the old people are the ones that carry the knowledge, they're the ones that carry the wisdom. So a lot of information was lost after De Soto went through. And the reason I said that it would have happened anyway, well, let's pretend that America was never found. Is that even conceivable to you? Is it conceivable that no one would ever find that those lands over there were there? No, somebody would have gone in, and the diseases would have spread anyway. It's a shame that it spread the way it did, but it happened. So, when the very first explorers started coming in, the first explorers and settlers and the Pilgrims, around the year 1620 or so, 1610, 1620, they started finding mounds. And they started finding earthworks. And I'm just going to go through a few of these very quickly. This 72-foot tall mound in Tennessee, and near Jackson, Tennessee. You probably don't know where it is, but it's a very large mound. It's a lot like Silbury in terms of its shape. Lots of these types of mounds, truncated. This is a truncated pyramid. It's in Etowah, Georgia, and this is a small one, 25 feet tall. Here is a large one at the same site. You can see the people walking up the side here. This is the site we were at where you saw the dancers too, Andrew. Okay. I have a number of archaeological reconstructions I want to show you. This is Town Creek, North Carolina. This is the actual mound that's there, the large one, and it's a reconstructed site. This would have been a small chiefdom that is part of a larger one. You can see the wall here, the palisade wall. You see these old movies of cowboys and Indians, and you'll see the U.S. Army, the cavalry, is always behind in these forts that had palisade walls. Palisade wall being logs that are stuck vertically into the ground. They have points at the top, and they had bastions. That's what the Indians did. The Indians built those forts. There were literally thousands of those in America when Columbus landed and when De Soto went through. This is an example not far from where we live in Memphis. It's called Lake George and Holly Bluff. We have been there. And it's got 25 mounds. It was a fortress. This was a huge wall around it. Usually the side toward the rivers, they're almost always by rivers, that side is open. So they fortified it around the edges. But this is actually quite common. There are loads of sites like this in America. This is one you can go to. It's on the Natchez Trace Parkway. It is called, geez, I forgot, Emerald. Only been there 100 times. It is a 30-foot mound. I believe it says that. Is that correct? Yeah, 35 foot here. Its base is 8 acres, so it's huge. And this mound is this one. So it's a mound on top of a mound. There's another one here at that end. I won't show you that one, no reason. What I'm doing is trying to show you what the first explorers found. And there was nobody living here. When the explorers came and they started finding these sites, Winterville, Mississippi, another one, very huge compound of mounds. When the explorers found these, they were all abandoned. They were overgrown. There were almost no Native Americans living around there then. They had all been forced to the west. And when the few Native Americans were brought in and asked about it, they all gave the same answer. They were asked, well, who built these things? And they said, we don't know. We didn't. This is the central mound at Winterville. That is a person standing there. It's a huge mound. I will note this. We took Andrew Collins to this site, and Andrew said that was the hottest day he had ever experienced in his life. I think it was 104 in Mississippi, and that's Fahrenheit, not centigrade. What is 104 centigrade anyway? Real hot, isn't it? Yeah, well, 104 Fahrenheit, and the humidity was like 70, which it always is. And of course, they found these rather remarkable places where there were many, many effigy mounds. And Serpent Mound, of course, is the most famous. There are loads of these, by the way. So when the natives could not say who built these mounds and the many earthworks that they found, what began then was the myth of the lost race. I suppose I can't see what's written up there, so I need to see it here. Basically the same thing. Archaeologists call it a virtual amnesia. And this is a quote out of textbooks. That's why it has the quote marks around it. Natives did not remember their own past. However, there were some that did, and that's really important to know. And what they knew was recorded, but it was forgotten and discovered around 2002, 2003. The myth of the mound builders. This is a picture of a lecture poster, and the date, 18 down here, it's 1886. And you can see no subject more fascinating than the mystery of the lost race of the Ohio and Mississippi valleys. Wonderful remains, and it's Professor J. McLean, and he is he's with the British. He's British, and I think it says he's with the Victorian Society somewhere there. I can't see it. That's all. This is also why a lot of mainstream archaeologists say that saying anything other than the ancestors of the Native Americans built the mounds is racist. That's what they say. Is it true? Probably not. So, the mounds, map 1877. I've seen, Hugh has shown this before. This was produced by the Bureau of Ethnology, which was a branch of the Smithsonian Institution. Smithsonian was founded in 1846 by a kind donation by a British citizen. By the 1840s, over 100,000 mound sites had been found by the Smithsonian. These dots on here, these red dots, represent mound sites, not individual mounds. And if you notice, they're all along rivers. This is like Lake Okeechobee in Florida. That is the Apalachicola River. Just thousands and thousands of mounds along the rivers. This is the Mississippi River going up. Here, goes all the way up. In one little area along the Mississippi in Iowa, there are 10,000 effigy mounds. One small area in Iowa. So, we know, and I will say this, we know that the ancestors of the Native Americans built the mounds and the earthworks. And I can say that even knowing that it's possible that there were intrusions, there was diffusion of all different kinds. Nevertheless, those people blended together in some sort of amalgam pot of genetics, and whatever we call Native Americans today, it was their ancestors, not saying anything about where those ancestors came from, that built the mounds. But that answers nothing. That doesn't give us an answer to some important questions. So, mound building in the Americas, few people really know all this. The very first mound we know of is in Bolivia, and it's dated to 8400 BC. And that particular area, actually, that's near where the Amazon begins. That's the Bolivian highlands where the Amazon begins. There are many other, well, this is that mound. Not that it's visible, a lot of that, an overgrown mound. There were loads of mounds made in Brazil, dated to 8000 BC in the Amazon basin. We know that too. And there are many more to be found. So right now, that is the oldest that we know of in terms of mounds. In America, we have Louisiana, and it goes to roughly 4000 BC or 6,000 years ago. That is where mound building began as far as we know. They look like these, the very first ones. These are actually archaic mounds still in existence, have not been excavated. They're on the campus of Louisiana State University. And actually I taught several years at LSU at one of its branches in Shreveport. There were archaic mounds all over the southeast of America, particularly along the coastlines. I'll show you some reconstructions of those in a minute. The most famous one is Watson Brake, Louisiana. It dates to 3200 BC, but it's no longer the oldest mound site in North America. That goes to the Monte Sano site in Louisiana. Watson Brake is a 22-acre complex. There's 22 acres inside here. It's an elevated ring of earth with 11 mounds on it. Inexplicable. There were over 100 radiocarbon dates, all centering on 3200 BC. Over 100 were taken on that, and they were all pretty much identical. I don't have a picture of it, but I'll tell you one of the things they found. They dug into them and they excavated this set of cubes, and it was 3 by 3 by 3. So it was 27 cubes, all a uniform 1.5 inches, almost like dice. It looked like a Rubik's Cube. They were all stacked together into a perfect 3 by 3 by 3 cube. Inexplicable. This is in Florida. It is called Big Tony Circle Mounds in Clewiston, Florida, not too far from Lake Okeechobee. 15 mounds covering 14 acres. You can see all of these elevated walkways here that connect mounds. And exactly what they were thinking about or what this is, it is pretty much unknown. Now, I have not done any astronomical alignments on these sites yet, and we'll get to some that I have done. But chances are there's something astronomical going on here. They're measuring something. But there's loads of these. You probably weren't aware of these. Another one, this is in Placita, Florida, Big Mound City. Very similar, it radiates out. You have a sunken, it's actually a sunken elevated platform. And it's sunken in an area where there's a taller mound here. There's these smaller platform mounds. And then there's an elevated walkway that leads to bigger mounds. Just very interesting earthworks. Another one, Shields Mound. This platform, to give you the size, 215 feet square. It's 18 feet high. And then it connects to this 1 mile long earthwork that goes to a huge circular enclosure on the other side. This one I like to show for because I'm from Memphis. This is near St. Petersburg, Florida. And you have this huge 10-acre platform, and it has this elongated walkway. But that is a guitar, clearly, up here in the corner, clearly, that was a site anticipating Elvis. I'm sure that's what that was. What those mounds were made out of are shells, densely packed shells. This is an example of one. This is one of the archaic mounds in South Carolina, dated to about 3000 BC, that has badly eroded. So you can go up to it. There's a walkway here, and that's what they look like on the inside. And then from nowhere, so we've gone from archaic mounds, roughly 4000 BC, and then suddenly from nowhere comes Poverty Point, Louisiana, which I could talk an hour about Poverty Point. It is absolutely inexplicable where this came from, why it's there. But what you can see, you see portions are dated to 3800 BC. Where those portions are, I'll show you a picture of where it is. But it's like right here on this bird effigy mound, a massive bird effigy mound. There are 8 miles of earthworks that are, does it have the size? These are roughly, well, they're 80 feet wide, 6 feet high. They had houses on them. There's a 40-foot gap between each one. There's enough earth in these to fill the Great Pyramid 30 times. And I'll show you this mound in a moment. But you can see there's an elevated one here. There's a mound out there. There's another mound further that way and more this way. They had a wood henge. They had another mound here, and you can see that these walkways that had posts in them, all these have been found. All the remains of these have been found. This site is so big now. If you've ever been to Disney, you've been on what they use to ride around. You get on I don't even know what they call it. It's like a tram almost, but it's a vehicle that has like 20 cars it's pulling. So you get on it at a park site like here, and then it drives you around over to this mound and around. It's so big. The mound, this is the Bird Mound, and we took this picture some years ago and put 2 photos together to show you. That's my wife. It is 72 feet tall, so that's 72 feet, and 650 by 710 feet. And the part that was dated to 3800 BC is right in here in an eroded area. So that leads us to the next mound building culture, and those are known as the Adena. And that's of most interest, and it's Andrew and I have agreed to co-author a work on this, on the Adena Mounds, and some interesting aspects of it. At least it's going to be partially about the Adenas. They built these large conical mounds. They put moats and earthworks. It looks just like things here in England. They put stone tombs and chambers inside of the mounds. They did both cremations and they did full skeletons. Lots of circular earthworks. There are numerous large skeletons found 7 feet and up. If you're a skeptic of that, when I say 7 feet and up, it's mainstream archaeology, definitely found. It's called the Adena elite hypothesis now by mainstream archaeologists, and that came out of our work and interaction with some mainstream archaeologists. And they say the last theory about the giants will be that it'll be the Adena elite hypothesis. I don't know if I have time to talk about it or not. They made tablets and put them into these. There's been about 24 tablets found, and pipes. Some mounds had literally 5,000 to 6,000 beautifully made pipes in them. And they built a lot of stone forts and sacred enclosures. This is an example of a large Adena mound. It's in Miamisburg, Ohio, 68 feet tall. It was originally covered in stone. Many of the American mounds were covered in stone. All the stone was taken and used in construction by the first people there. This has been partially excavated, but not completely excavated. Another Adena mound is in Marietta, Ohio. This has never been excavated. There is certainly a large chamber inside of this. It's a 30-foot high conical mound, and it's encircled by a moat. This is the moat. You can see it here. It's so big you can actually barely discern it. And this is a high walkway, which I'll show you here. See how there's your big mound. See this elevation here? This is elevated and then it goes down. What that is, so here is that mound. Can everybody see the red dot? Yeah. Okay, here is that mound called the Conus Mound. This is the moat going around it, and the high area is this, and it's a straight elevated linear earthwork that goes to a square enclosure with a mound, another one. And what this does, if you stood on this on the night of the winter solstice, and you were there at 11 p.m., standing there, and you looked straight up this, and you looked up to the horizon, you would see the star Deneb set at around 11:45 p.m., which is important. There are other alignments here, but I'm starting with the star Deneb, which is, of course, the brightest star of Cygnus. I don't know if it's the most important, but certainly the brightest. Another example of Adena earthworks, I don't know how many circles there are. Nobody's ever counted them. I tried to in the Mound Encyclopedia, but couldn't do it. There's just too many. Tens of thousands of them. They're high earthworks made into perfect circles. Usually there's an interior moat. It's almost always on the inside. I don't know why, but it is. Inside of Adena mounds, and many mounds, stone chambers. This is something that very few people know. Most people think the Indians just threw the body in, maybe put some logs over them or some bark or something and just built the mound on them. They built very intricate stone chambers. In fact, some of them were so good. I mean, look at the workmanship. This is an actual one excavated by the Smithsonian. And these were in Missouri, actually near my wife's family's farmland. In fact, it was once in her family long ago. But these are probably within every unexcavated Adena mound in the United States. This is in Moundville, West Virginia, a map from 1830. I believe it was 1830. And what I want to show you is here. This is the Ohio River. Okay, you can see it running. Here is an earthwork. There is a large mound. Is that it right there? Yes, that's the large mound. And then you'll see lookout, and I'm showing you this lookout because it's important. I'll show it to you in a minute. But there's a lookout here, and there's another one here. There's one here. I believe there's one up there. And there's another mound with an enclosure. There were once over 100 mounds right here with stone towers. Now this large mound right here, it's called the Grave Creek Mound. That is it. It's 69 feet tall. It was initially encircled by a moat. It has been filled in. And there was an octagon earthwork close to it. Do you remember this? One of the stone towers, this is from 1830. This is what it looked like. And it had been pretty much in ruins, and the locals had taken a lot of the stone of these towers. But you can see the view it has. There is the Grave Creek Mound. And this is the Ohio River. So these lookouts, they believe, were literally used as lookouts. They were stone towers. This is a site of both Hopewell and Adena era mounds. It's in East Dubuque, Illinois. It's on the bluff of the Mississippi River, 26 mounds there. And it begins with, I'm showing this because it's a site where they started finding these burials in stone tombs that were made in circular fashions, where they would literally, like the spokes of a wheel, of skeletons. And this is a site where they found several 7-foot skeletons. Several of them were found here by the Smithsonian. This is another example of these wheel spokes, but it's reversed. Notice the heads are toward the inside, except for these souls who had their heads put between their legs for whatever reason. Who knows? But there's a lot of these have been found in the Americas. That's sort of inexplicable too. This is the Kanoa River Valley in West Virginia, and it is South Charleston and Charleston, West Virginia. You can see the Ohio River, the Kanoa River, that's how it's an Indian name. By the way, you know, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Tennessee, Illinois are all Indian names. All those, almost all the states on the eastern side of the U.S., except for the ones where the first colonialists went into, have Indian names. And most of the cities are Indian names, like Memphis, yeah. Sorry, that just popped in my head. Well, how can that be? It's not, yeah. All right. I'm showing you this because we have been here. Andrew showed last year at this conference a film, very brief film of a museum. Actually, the woman that ran the museum here at this mound, which I'll show you. And at this mound, she talked about a 7-foot 8-inch skeleton that was removed from these. From this particular mound, they found one 7-footer, and a different mound they found one 7-foot 8. I believe altogether there were 8 7-foot skeletons found in the mounds here. This is a shot from the top of that mound. This is downtown South Charleston. If you ever go there, the museum's like right there. Won't help you. This is an example of what they found inside the large mound called the Creole Mound. And again, you have the wheel spokes going around a 7-foot tall skeleton. That one's probably 7 foot 3 inches tall. The show Ancient Aliens went to this mound in South Charleston last year sometime to film. It's called the Poorhouse Mound, the Shawnee Mound, the Institute Mound, the Reservation Mound. All those names, which makes it very confusing in the U.S. And made my mound encyclopedia that much more difficult to do because most mounds have 3, 4, 5 different names. It was 26 feet in height, and there were 2 7-foot tall skeletons excavated from it. Some of the characteristic artifacts found in Adena Mounds are Adena tablets. This one is very interesting. I can't take a lot of time and discuss it, but what I want to show you is this. Down here you see water. See it? The base. And what you have then going up, it's like this. It's like a tree. A tree going up on both sides. It's divided into 4 quadrants. I've had people tell me it's a yin and a yang symbol at the top, maybe. That I don't know. I just don't have time to talk about it much. But I do want to show you another one. And what do you see on this one? This is the Gateskill tablet, pulled out of the Gateskill Mound. What do you see on it that you can identify? Say it out loud so I can hear it. Hands, yes, look at that, a hand that's got a hole in it, doesn't it? And there's one there. These are probably birds at the top. So you have this divided into 4 pieces, or 4 quadrants, and you have it a kind of a cross in the middle, and you have a hand with a hole in it here, and up here you have what probably is some sort of a bird of some kind. As I said earlier, the Adenas built forts. This is one we've been to many times. It's astonishing when you go to these things. They're incredible, and I'm just going to skip through them here. How much time do I have left altogether? You're a mathematical genius. How much? 25. 25, good. 25. Okay. All right. These are on the tops of flat mountains. The very top of these flat mountains, the sides are generally very steep. We made the mistake of taking a tour group here many years ago, and we would always tell people, please don't climb on things. And as we were coming up, and it's very steep here, one of our guys had gone up and gotten tired and sat on a log that was on the ground, on a tree, and then it took off sliding down the hill with him on it. People, if you go on a tour, listen to your tour guides. That's the point of that. In some of the places, the wall here, and when I say wall, it's made out of both dirt and stone. But in some places, it's 50 feet in height. Huge. But it has 33 gaps. There's a gap, there's a gap, there's a gap, there's a gap, there's a gap. So archaeologists say, well, it couldn't have been a fort because they wouldn't have put the gaps in there. But it's not really been excavated. What would you put in gaps like that? A bastion. That's what you'd put in them. Another one, another hilltop fort, you can see this clearly was a defensive enclosure. Again, dates to Adena, maybe 500 BC, 600 BC. Outer walls, these very complex entryways, and you can see the size of it, inside of it. It'll say how big it is. The most famous one of all is called Fort Ancient in Ohio, dates to 100 BC, probably earlier. It's 100 acres, perfectly flat inside this thing, just perfectly flat. These outer walls are up to 23 feet high, and it's a very impressive site. They run 18,000 feet. That's how far that is. It's a long way around there. Lots of stone mounds in it, lots of paved walkways, lots of platforms. And they know now, up in here in particular is where they've been studying, they know that there were astronomical alignments made from these stone platforms through gaps in the walls. And we'll get to some of the astronomical alignments in a moment. Another example, this is Indian Fort Mountain in Berea, Kentucky, a place where we took Andrew about 2 years ago. 17 stone walls here. They're 20 to 30 feet wide, 20 to 25 feet high. There's what they look like. And this is a gap that was made by a logging company. So they cut through the wall. This is actually a wall. And what's it look like after Andrew dug into it and excavated it? No, that's not true. Somebody had gone in and dug. We don't know who did it. But this is what they look like on the inside. They're overgrown now, but they were made out of piled stone. In Georgia, this is Fort Mountain, Georgia, absolutely inexplicable. It's a 900-foot long wall of stone, 3 to 10 feet high, 5 to 16 feet wide. Probably had bastions in it, probably had an outer log wall, and it was a fortress of some kind. It's another picture of it. Just massive place. I put this in here for hue. This is Spanish Hill, Pennsylvania. It is an Adena fort. It would be on the top of this hill where that mansion is. And they don't want anybody up there. They have they've had so many people coming up looking for artifacts, of which there's been lots of artifacts found here, that they've gated it, closed it off, and you will get arrested if you go there. But it was an Adena fort. Lots of huge skeletons found in this area. And down here in this field was a huge Susquehannock village. And the Susquehannocks were literally exterminated in 1778. They were wiped out in the 1600s except for a small group. They were a branch of the Iroquois that were exceedingly physically huge people. The Hopewell. The Hopewell then started around 500 BC. There's overlaps in all these, inexplicable too. Nobody knows why the cultures overlap, but Hopewell mounds can be found everywhere here, and I'm going to roll through them. This is a eagle effigy mound in Georgia, 10 feet tall. This one I want to show because what it was actually solved in Andrew's questing conference. Was it 2007 we came? Because it's in the 2009 version of the Mound Encyclopedia. Okay, this was in the original Smithsonian publication on mounds, and this was said to be a candelabra, and this outer earthwork was said to look like a Hebrew lantern, oil lamp. And so it was evidence of ancient Hebrews in America. Mainstream archaeologists hated that. They called it a gridiron and said, well, obviously they were playing football, so they laid these lines out. And they said it's imaginary, it never existed. It was proven to exist a few years ago in the 90s. They found the original survey by the U.S. Corps of Engineers and Thomas Jefferson's signature on it. Jefferson had sent out the Corps of Engineers to look at it. I brought this over, the original survey over, and showed Andrew. And I said, what do you think of this? And Andrew turned it upside down and said, well, it's a bird effigy. And that made me mad. That's true, it really did. And he said, well, show it to Ian. Ian Lawton was a speaker then. I don't know if you know who he is, but anyway, Ian Lawton was a speaker. And I took it to Ian, and I turned it this way, so it was upside down, and I said, Andrew said to show you this. What do you think it is? And Ian went, oh, it's a bird effigy. And at that, I immediately knew, okay, they're correct. So I put it in the Mound Encyclopedia. I told that story in the Mound Encyclopedia. That came out in 2009. Now when you read mainstream archaeology textbooks, they say, well, it was a bird effigy. And of course, there's the famous serpent mound. Everybody knows about it. This is something that the Hopewell made. Seen from the sky, see these on Ancient Aliens all the time. And how many effigy mounds were there? Probably 100,000 effigy mounds alone at one time. Most of them are actually birds, eagles. That's the large majority. The original Hopewell site, it's been absolutely obliterated. I'm not going to take the time to explain it much, but you can see there's these embankments on the outside. The area here, how many acres does it say? 111? Is that what it says? Okay. So it's a huge area. You can see another enclosure has 7 mounds in it. Reminds people of the Pleiades, although I don't believe it is. Then you have these squares pop up everywhere with a mound at all the openings. Another example, the Hopeton, I believe, the Hopeton earthworks. You have this sort of a square with openings, a circle, a large circular formation, and a long set of parallel lines, which those are going to pop up in a minute in another slide in another area. These are just some near Chillicothe, Ohio. A lot of them, portions of them still exist. And they're just massive sites. And without being there and seeing them, you cannot appreciate what they are. And I'll never forget Andrew's reaction the first time he went to this site, which we stood, see where the dot is on the far left? Okay, that is called the Observatory Mound. This is Newark, Ohio. Andrew stood there and he said, why would anybody make something like this? And he said, you could put a dozen Stonehenges in this thing. And yes, you could. You could put 8 Roman Colosseums in that circle. And it's a perfect circle. It connects to an octagon. There are truncated mounds, truncated pyramids at each point of this. So this observatory mound, that is it. This is 14 feet high. See these little wings right here? Those are actually on the survey. See the wings coming off of it right there? This is the beginning of the circle on one side. I want to show it to you from the air in the 1930s. When the natives used these sites, by the way, there were no trees in them. This is a 1930 shot. You can see the outer earthwork. This is where the observatory mound is. And you can see how it's solid. And then there's this large octagon. And this is what it looks like on Google Earth today. And I'll make it easier to see. There you go. This was part of it. It's a golf course, by the way. But what's happened is this is one of the few sites in America that is pristine. They can't dig into it. They have to get permission to even move the holes. If they want to put a hole in a different spot on the greens, they have to get permission. And they can't do any kind of excavation, but it's kept it in perfect condition. And you can see the earthwork running here. There is one of the mounds, one of the rectangular mounds, and these are tee boxes. This is actually a tee box for several greens. And there's an observation tower here that you can go up and see the whole site, but it's massive. And if you look right here, this little corner, it is this. This is the corner. The walls, these outer walls are a uniform 14 feet high. So that is what it looks like today. You cannot understand. No picture that I've ever seen is like being there. It's incredible. Let me skip ahead. I want to show you this line. See this? That is the beginning of what is called the Great Hopewell Road. The Great Hopewell Road is formed by the one wall on the outside is 40 feet wide, 4 to 6 feet high. There's 160 feet flat area between the walls, and there's another wall that's 4 to 6 feet high and 40 feet wide. That ran 56 miles continuously to the south, where it connected to another circle and octagon. Just unbelievable. I'll take a moment and show you this, the Great Circle. There is an eagle effigy in the center. The Great Circle is 30 acres. It is exactly the same size as Avebury. Is that how you say it? I'm close enough? Okay. It has one opening. Eagle effigy may or may not be an eagle. This is a 1930 shot. You can see the big earthwork in the outside. It has an interior moat. The eagle effigy is here. This is what the moat looks like. This is the outer wall. The moat is 7 feet deep. The outer walls are 9 feet. They had the fair in here. That's why it was preserved. They used to do the fair and people couldn't get in and out except through one gateway. When this was being used by the Native Americans, there were no trees, there was no growth at all, and they had a yellow-colored sand on the bottom, on the floor, and red-colored sand on the wall. This is a shot of the one opening. This is the beginning of the moat. You can see Eagle Mound right here. This is Eagle Mound. And way off in the distance here, you can see the outer wall going around. Enormous. What was the octagon used for? Well, this is it. I'm just not going to take the time to talk about it. It measured the 18.61 year cycle of the moon. We know that there were eclipses that they were measuring, artist rendering. This is the Ohio State official rendering of what they believe it looked like. The site is almost indescribable. I mean, how would you talk about all these? You have the circle and the octagon. Notice they show no trees, no growth at all because they burned it all out. Nobody lived inside of it. They know that. They lived outside of the area. It was a sacred area. My favorite of the Hopewell sites is this one. It is in Portsmouth, Ohio. Here's the Ohio River at the bottom. This is Kentucky. On the bottom is Kentucky. The top is Ohio. Is he here? No. Okay, so up here is the main site. It's very high. This is a steep, steep hill. And there you can see two horseshoe-shaped earthworks, mounds, and all kinds of strange earthworks. And then you have these linear walkways. They're calling them embankments here, but they're pretty uniform. They're 160 feet wide, 3 to 5 foot in height outer walls, but the walls were 40 feet wide. So it's about the width of one of your M highways. And this ran for 5 miles. It came to the Ohio River, picked up on the other side, and ran to this circular enclosure, very strange enclosure. It looks a lot like Atlantis. On this side, there was another set, and this is old Portsmouth from 1840-something when this survey was done. It ran all through Portsmouth, came here to the Scioto River, where the Scioto River comes into the Ohio, picked up on the other side and went to this very strange square enclosure. And that was 7 miles in length. Just an unbelievable, unbelievable place. And I've actually done measurements on this. The survey is off. These are correct, and this is basically correct. But this actual site is located like here. All this has been destroyed, pretty much. We've been there several times. This over here is still intact, and the only thing that remains up here I'll show you in a moment. But I want to show you this site called the Big Site. If you look at Wikipedia, Wikipedia will tell you this is the Big Site. It's a good example of how Wikipedia can be very unreliable. This is not the Big Site. The Big Site is this. This is it from 1930, University of Kentucky photo. This is it today. That's some distance shot. You can barely see the mound in the center. This is an up-close shot. So you can see here's the mound, and this is the moat around the Big Site. This is on the flood wall mural along the Ohio River in Portsmouth. You can see the circular earthworks here. And again, that total distance is 5 miles. It's 1.5 miles from there to there. And the rest of the distance is this walkway. What remains today is this horseshoe and some of these earthworks and that mound. There's the horseshoe. The walls are 10 feet high. We've done you have to get permission from the Cherokee tribe in Oklahoma to get into it. We've been in it several times and held several sort of ceremonies, and it's very strange. I don't have time to talk about it, thank God. I don't really talk about my own experiences much, but it's a very strange place. And the other horseshoe is where this school building was. So they built the school building and just obliterated the horseshoe and the rest of the earthworks, and then they closed the school. Now they're talking about tearing it down. So that's the way of America. This is the circular earthworks looking back toward the horseshoe. And I'm showing you this because we believe there was a ceremony where they would be on the top of this high mound and they would look at the setting of Deneb and the Cygnus constellation here. And they signaled on the night of the winter solstice, and they signaled with fires. That is known too. This is the square. The square matters too, because if you were up here looking toward the square, which would be way over there, you would see the setting of Orion, which matters, and I'll show you that in a minute. Oddly, the square exists, but this doesn't. There's a house built right there. Laura called this the eyedropper, and it's a very apt term. It is an eyedropper. And I remember knocking on the door and asking the people if they had any strange experiences. And they were astonished when we showed them the survey. A bit of that circle does remain there. The last mound culture, the Mississippians, it's the one most people know about. We're going to start at this northern outpost, Aztalan. That's in Wisconsin. This was a survey of the Octagon site. There are over 60 mounds, just on this map alone, outside of it. See all these mounds? Mounds everywhere, mounds, mounds. And this was a walled enclosure, walled fort. And if you look at, which one? I can't see it. This mound right here in the corner, it is this one. And of course, Cahokia. It's impossible to talk for a few minutes about Cahokia and give you any idea of what it is. There were over 120 mounds here. The estimate of the number of people that lived at Cahokia, the low is 10,000, the high is 50,000. Some people believe 25,000. Most archaeologists say it couldn't have been more than 10,000. 15? Excellent. So why they believe they left here, one of the reasons is they ran out of wood. When De Soto went through, and even when the settlers came through, there were almost no trees here at all. They were growing vast fields of corn and squash and beans. In fact, that's what De Soto's men lived off of. They just took all the food the Indians were growing. The large mound here, Monk's Mound, a walled fortress, enormous walls. And by the way, here they actually found along where the walls once were, there were these lines of arrowheads, where they'd find hundreds of arrowheads. What would that be? Well, somebody attacked the fort, and a lot of arrows hit the walls and stuck. And when they burned it to the ground, it all fell straight down. Just found lines of them along the walls. This is the big mound, Monk's Mound at Cahokia, named Monk's Mound because Monk lived on the top of it. It's 100 feet tall, 10-story building, covers 14 acres. By the way, the Great Pyramid of Giza covers 13 acres. Back in 1987, this is so big, 5,000 people got on this upper part of it. 5,000 for a ceremony. At the base of this, right in the heart, not on the outside, but at the heart of it, there is a stone structure of some kind that is 45 feet by 30 feet. Never been excavated, have no idea what's in it. I'm sure it's a burial chamber of some kind, but never been, and it won't be excavated. Some of the artifacts found from these cultures, potheads. They had a lot of potheads in those days. This is a pipe. It's a pipe. If you look at the back of these, you can see, and often you have some where they're bent forward, and the stem that you suck on comes right out of the rear end, and then their back is where you put the substance that you're going to smoke. Literally hundreds of these large pipes, some of them are this big. So they would sit them in the middle, and they'd have a stem that could be 6 to 8 feet long, and they would just take a hit, take a drag, whatever you call it, and then they'd move it to the next person, and the pipe would spin around. Another example of a pipe. These are marble statues pulled out of the Etowah, Georgia mounds. They're 2.5 feet tall. They have these very strange backpacks on, which I won't show you. The Mississippians also had all these smaller chiefdoms, and I'm showing you this one because it's one that we went with. You'd think in southern Mississippi it would be warm, but it was actually quite cold. You can see there's a large flat top mound back here, another mound. There were 3 mounds here. This is one in Florence, Alabama. Just a huge, very steep mound. Covers 2.3 acres. Arkansas, I had other pictures to show this, but I decided I can't do it. This site was occupied over 1,000 years. There were 18 mounds, very large mounds. It had a huge earthen embankment around it, 10-foot high embankment. And it was one of the very first that archaeologists began to look for solar and stellar alignments, which that matters, and we'll get back to that hopefully. Troyville, Louisiana, you can see an 80-foot mound in the center. This is a reconstruction. Most of this is destroyed. A bit of the central mound remains. And then we get to Moundville, Alabama. This is a U.S. Air Force photo. You can see here's a central mound. There's a huge plaza right here. The whole site, which is basically this, covers 326 acres. It was a walled fortress. The tallest mound was 62 feet. It's right at the top here. And this is one of the places where the Path of Souls ritual was verified. In fact, it's so verified, they have a show on about it there. You can see what some of these mounds look like. This is from the top of a mound, looking at a mound that Cygnus sat on, or behind. This is Andrew looking, we were standing on the same mound, but looking out over others. And you can see they go around this central plaza area. This is the central mound where you make most of the observations. This is probably a mound where a shaman or a member of the elite lived. This is the tallest mound at the site. There is a man walking up or down it there, so you can see how big it was. This is something you will not see until 1989 and 90. Skeletons were displayed at many American mound sites. This was from the University of Alabama at Moundville. And back in the 30s, there were reports of dozens of 7-foot skeletons excavated there by Dr. Walter Jones. Today, every one of those reports is denied that they were mistaken. They mismeasured. That's what they say. This is another example of where skeletons were displayed at Wickliffe, Kentucky, a mound site there. And this is very disrespectful to Native Americans, and that's why we will never be able to test any skeletons of giant remains. This was Chucalissa in Memphis, and enough. So, Path of Souls. Andrew is standing in front of the Walter Jones Museum, the man who found the 7-footers that they deny, at Moundville. And what you can see here are the following. Notice this up here. All right, that is a gorget. It would hang around the neck. It wouldn't be that big, though. Here you can see a wide-eyed skull and a bone. And down here you see a feathered serpent. Whoop. This is the feathered serpent on a pot from Moundville. This is where it came from. What is the feathered serpent? I'm just going to tell you what these are. If you want to know why we know that, you can ask that question later. It's mainstream archaeology. The feathered serpent is Scorpius. It is the constellation of Scorpius. And the star Antares was the eye of the serpent. Here is a depiction off of a pot. That would be the eye. The feathered serpent, to the Native Americans, was the ruler of the underworld. It was seen floating in the southwestern sky during the summer months. And during the summer months, you couldn't perform any burials. So you would bundle bones. You would save the remains of the deceased until the winter. What did the Native Americans believe and why? Well, here you can see all the elements. Notice there's a hand with an eye in it. See it? And that actually is the Milky Way. And it's going around this sphere. They believed that the universe is a sphere. It is held together by a tree, or notice, that's a pole. See it? It's a striped pole. Striped pole down here at the bottom. Notice there's a swastika. The swastika is the underworld. How appropriate is that? There are actual swastikas, look exactly like Germany's swastikas, that have been pulled out of mounds on all kinds of artifacts. In the center, the earth itself, this is the middle world, the lower world, the middle world, which is earth where we live, and the upper world, that is the symbol of the upper world. The shaman and the elite would dress up as birds because the bird was a raptor bird or an eagle was the most powerful of all. We'll talk about that. There is Scorpius. You have the thunderbird, lots of other things here. The underworld has these powers that come up through it. Shaman, I'll show you this. There is about halfway up, there's a raccoon. I'll show you the raccoon again in a minute. So what they believed is we have two souls. One is called the life soul. The wide-eyed skull represents the life soul. The life soul is material. They believed in animism. Everything is alive. But that aliveness, it is a mindless type of energy. It's mindless, and it's also dangerous. So when we die, you have to do something with the body and the bones because it's dangerous. They believed in cremation, but they had to do it at a certain time. So they often stored the remains until the winter. But this represents the life soul, two souls. Then there is the free soul. So here they're showing the free soul leaving the life soul. The free soul is what we would define as our soul. It has memory, it has our personality. The entire journey on the path of souls is depicted on this copper ornament. I don't know how well you can see this. Can you see that? You can see it's a hand, an eye in the hand. It used to be, when I first got into this in the 80s, nobody thought we'd ever figure out what these were. Nobody. But it got a lot of people into the field. And they said, the eye in the hand, well, it's a universal symbol. Well, what's it mean? Well, it's a universal symbol. What's it mean? It's just a universal symbol. That's literally what they would say. But all the elements of it are there. It hung around the neck of the elite. And here's what it was. Now just get to the point. This is a hand, 3 stars, and it's showing on both sides, but literally, those are the 3 belt stars of Orion. Long ago, a hole occurred, and the Maya called it Shilbaba, but it was the Orion Nebula. And somebody tried to block it. It's a portal. It's a hole. Somebody tried to block it. They stuck their hand up. It was one of the twins. It was one of 2 twins. Yeah, 2 twins of a twin set. And the gods cut off the hand, and they hung it from the sky to prove a point. But the eye is the Orion Nebula. Then you have this split. Well, that's the dark rift of the Milky Way. That is what that is. This eye is an ogi, a portal. It is literally a portal, and it leads to another portal. And that portal is in the system of Cygnus, probably Deneb, although the exact star is not known. When this belief started, we don't know. That's one of the big questions. But this is the earliest artifact, the gate skill tablet that I can find that has the eye in hand, or that kind of symbol. The eye in the hand is on lots of artifacts. By the way, these were ritual objects. These weren't everyday objects. These objects held certain material that were used in these rituals. Here it is again. The 2 skulls represent, the twisted skulls represents the 2 souls. You have the eye in the hand. Here is another example. So let's look at it. Here you have the 3 belt stars of Orion, Orion's nebula, and notice there are other stars. It forms literally a hand. And Orion's nebula is the portal. Showing what the souls do. This is the life soul returning to earth. Notice a mound over it. And the free soul goes to the hand, but that is not the destination. I came here from Memphis, Tennessee, but if you looked at my plane ticket in the beginning, it would have said Detroit, Michigan. But I had to go to Detroit to get here. And that's the way this works. The first part of this journey was going from Earth to Orion's Nebula. Then you went from Orion's Nebula, actually it went under the Earth because there's a time you got to do this, through the underworld, and the next night the soul got out on the Milky Way. It went to the split, the dark rift of the Milky Way. There it met a bird of some kind, a raptor bird, usually an eagle, sometimes a falcon. This is actually excavated in a mound in Georgia, an Earth Lodge mound in Ocmulgee, Georgia. The bird was represented in the elite. This shows the power of the elite. I haven't said I have said what the bird is. The forked eye pops up again and again, and you'll see the fork is the dark rift of the Milky Way. The eye represents the ogi there. This is an example of an eagle on a pot from Moundville. This is what is on it. Notice the forked eye, one long end, one short end. Another example off of a pot. Notice you have one part of this forked eye that continues on and one short end. All that's important in this path of souls. And the ogi is so important. This is just fascinating to me. This was excavated. How much time I got left? Am I done?
Done, yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm done. The Ogie, it looks like UFOs, doesn't it? All right. Do I have any time for a question? Nope. Okay. I have told you what the path of souls is. That is Cygnus. That is actually the northern cross. That cross shows up. That's the dark rift and the forked eye. And there he is again. The 3 stars of Orion. This is out of Spiro, Oklahoma. And it's so mainstream now. Last slide I'll show. You go into this show at Moundville, Alabama called The Portal to the Starry Path, where they have a 3-dimensional Native American shaman telling you this story. So, that's it. I'll hang around if anybody has a question. Thank you.